living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep. The poor and the underclass are growing. Racial justice and human rights are non-existent. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain. That is their primary method of survival. Keep us asleep, keep us selfish.
Anarchy, I am your host, Michael Storm, and we do this live every Sunday right here on the Republic Broadcasting Network from 1 to 3 p.m. Central Time. Come together and share in a beautiful Sunday. It's actually a little bit cold today. I'm kind of bundled up, just trying to keep a little bit extra warm because, I don't know, all of a sudden the temperature went down. I thought it was supposed to be spring. I thought that rodent didn't see his shadow and that we had an early spring to expect. And I don't know. It's just the way the weather is. It just comes and goes, and it's otherwise just beautiful. It's wonderful to be back here again and to be able to come and share a few minutes of my life with you. And there's a million things to talk about, and we will dive into it all. We'll try to touch base on some of these other things that other people are talking about, just because it's really big right now. So we'll do that. We'll get in there, but let's do the homework first and the basics. Pull up your browser, go to towardanarchy.com. Make sure you're sharing the links and liking and following and subscribing and all those things that are required to make this thing work. If you're live with me today, it is March 15th, and right there on the front page, you should see that my guest will be Jon Burlew. He's my friend. He is an educator and an announcer. He was my primary instructor in college in this particular profession right here, this broadcasting thing. And so we're going to talk today. We'll catch up. We'll talk about some of the things that he's done in radio, as well as playing around with stand-up, being a stand-up. Some of the things that he's done as a teacher and a mechanical bull rider. We'll talk about that. And then there'll be plenty of talk, geek talk, comic books, superheroes. One of the things that made a big connection between Jon and I when we first met was the fact that we're both real comic book guys, not just, not your modern day version of superhero comic book fans. We're actually guys with tons of the physical books, and he has thousands of them. So we'll probably have to talk a little bit about his collection, and we'll have to we'll swing our sabers a little bit and talk about how many books I've owned and things. Do the man thing, but in a little bit of a geek way. And you can follow along towardanarchy.com. If you have to, just go through the archive right there. And while you're up there, there's the email list that you can sign up for. You might notice this is really super cool. I was so happy about this because if you remember last week when, sort of literally right at this time, I was probably talking about this same thing and about how I've been making some changes to the website and how I had just paid for the hosting and the security and all that for the upcoming year. And I hadn't got it all configured quite properly yet there. And so it was giving me a little bit of a fit. I don't know. You probably couldn't necessarily tell, but it just wasn't working right. And everything wasn't quite right. But I finally knocked it all out, and I have it to where it shows the little lock button in your browser when you visit the site. It may not show it on every single page, because what happens is if I have an image that doesn't have the S, the HTTPS, but I think I added one too many T's there. HTTPS, that's the hypertext protocol, and it's secure. That's the S part of it. And if that's not in every single link that's within the website, particularly if it's to like an image, even if it's on the server, it doesn't recognize it as being an image that's being served up from a secure space, even though it technically is. It's kind of weird the way it does it, but it's cool because it makes it the basic idea behind this is that so you know that when you go to the website and you see Toward Anarchy, you see that lock up there, you know that it's me, that the information is coming from me, that what's on the website is images that I've shared, is links that I've shared, and then vice versa. If you sign up for the email list, that's what I'm getting at there. If you sign up for the email list, I'll send you an email every week updating you about the show and what's coming up, and maybe throw in some contests and things like that. I have some giveaways, and coming up, next week, Robert Long, the custom carver, he's got all these great custom things that he could do, and some things that I'm thinking about working with him on, things that I can give away on the show, and things that you can go get gifts for people, things like that, and get yourself maybe a little discount, and it kicks back to the show. One of those win-win situations, and it's all about you knowing that you're exchanging your information with me when it comes to all of that, or with people or services that I trust to do what they say. And if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of any page now, it'll show you that it's GoDaddy verified and secured, and you can actually click on that, and it'll take you to all the information about the actual certificate, and it'll tell you about the validation of it and how long it lasts. And it's just it's a neat thing that I've never had on any of my websites before, and I'm really excited about being able to be able to say that it's there, that I'm able to offer it to the listeners. So towardanarchy.com, and you can see that. And I already mentioned, coming up next week, Robert Long, the custom carver. Another one of these guys, it's an actual real person that I know, is a real friend of mine. And it's cool because I have to take this opportunity, these ones like this, where I invite Jon to come and be a guest on the show, or I invite Robert to come and be a guest on the show, or Ronnie Phillips, another student of Jon's. These people, they themselves reach other people that aren't listening to this show. They themselves may not be listening to the show specifically, but they are when it comes to, when Ronnie's on or when Jon's on, when they know somebody that's on the show, they're definitely listening. And so there's this larger, greater audience touching these people that could potentially be tuning in right now, or into the archive, or tuning into RBN at any time in the future after this airs, because they're interested in the individual. And so I have to take the opportunity, and then I apologize if you've been lured here under sort of a false pretense. The show is called Toward Anarchy. You probably expected to tune the dial in and find some angry white guy screaming in the microphone about how bad things are and about how you should overthrow your government. Well, I don't necessarily disagree with those things, but I'm not talking about them because it's not productive. There's not a lot of productive value in pontificating about the overthrow of the government and what would happen if we did it. The reality of anarchy is that I'm talking about, that I'm trying to express to people, is that idea that we live in anarchy every single day, and that every second we make these choices and decisions, and we love and we hate and we create and we destroy and we influence the world around us, and we do it all without consideration of or the need for authority or its opinion. And then along with that, I've had to add this idea that, because these conversations, they continue to come up, and it's when you say you're an anarchist, well, they say, well, how are you going to do this if you trying to go everything alone? Anarchy doesn't mean loner. That's not in the word. It means no ruler. It means that you get to be the deciding jury member on all of the decisions that you have to make about your life, whether it's your economics, or whether it's your personal relationships, or whether it's your work desires, or whether it's you choose to participate in society and governance. There is a theory that these things can be done for the benefit of the people, and they can be done voluntarily. And the theory exists because reality exists, because we do in fact live in anarchy every minute, every second of every day, and that we just need to we have to remove this idea that authority is important. It's the problem with assumed authority, right? It's not just that you can't have some rules and you can't have some leaders and you can't have some organization. That's it. That's not it. Anarchy doesn't preclude these hierarchies or rules, as long as they are self-imposed, as long as you agree to them voluntarily. It's not going to answer the questions of society. How do we fix this or how do we do that in any other way other than through voluntary cooperation? And so that's what it's all about. And I don't even have to make the argument. It's self-explanatory. It's right there in front of your face, and its reality is undeniable. You can argue about the minutia of it. It's kind of funny because so I didn't know if I wanted to talk anything at all about the coronavirus, but let's be serious. It's everywhere, and there's some serious implications going on. And there's a bunch of arguments that have come up over the week that, again, they're based in dishonesty. It's such a dishonest argument every time. Okay, so let's talk about the coronavirus specifically and about vaccines, and let's skip past all of the conspiracy. Let's not try to assume that we know or can know exactly who, what, where, when, why, and how of the creation of it and where it's gone. This is a meta event. I've talked about this before. It's just a reality. It's a thing that's happened, and pontificating about its reality is pretty limited for anything other than scientific purposes, to go back and trace and, patient zero, maybe find out where it came from, all these things, maybe potentially if that's your job to do. The rest of us need to be here worried about how it's going to, the problem, the reaction, the solution. The fact that government is already prepared to deal with these things, and that what happens is it doesn't matter if they create this event. It doesn't matter if they pull off a mass school shooting, or if they release a virus into the public that creates a panic, because they already know that this is what's going to happen if it happens naturally or if they do it themselves. It doesn't matter. They're already prepared for it, and they're already going to take advantage of it. What I tell people all the time is that continuity of government is called continuity of government for a reason. It's because government must continue. It's not because we must continue. It's not because, it doesn't matter about any of the rest of us. It's about them. It's about the political elite class, the actual elected, and keeping their system in place of order and control. It has nothing to do with the rest of us. And so what you see happening here is a typical government reaction to the coronavirus, and a typical public reaction to the coronavirus and what's happening, and the fact that people read headlines instead of reading into stories. And one of the scary things that's coming out of this, and of course you'll know this, you follow the show at all, you follow me at all, you know that I have issues with vaccines, particularly with forcing vaccines on people. If you want to take vaccines, that's fine. You want to have a conversation about the value of them, and you want to have an honest conversation about them, let's have it. But to speak to the dishonest conversation this week, I don't know how many times I came across this where somebody brought up vaccinations, anti-vaxxers, if you will. I wear it as a banner, thank you. I don't think that it's an insult at all. I am against the practice because I see that it's a misused practice and it's abused practice. And I've seen this all throughout this week where they've tried to say, well, anti-vaxxer this, anti-vaxxer they're doing, you don't hear much from them right now. It's just all these ridiculous statements, as if we have anything to do with any disease, period. For one, not being vaccinated doesn't mean that you're sick. Let's get that straight right up front. Just because you haven't been vaccinated doesn't mean you're going to be sick. And it doesn't necessarily mean that your chances are any greater of becoming sick. Now, so these people are, it disturbed me how many times I saw it, because again, it's this dishonest conversation. Instead of talking smack on Facebook, those people should be out there the first in line to get every single experimental vaccine, new release vaccine for 19 that comes out. The second it's available, you should be in line if you're one of these people that believes in vaccines, or if you believe that you can blame people who don't get vaccinated for something like this. First of all, even with measles and things like that, the outbreaks that have happened in the last few years that have been publicly highlighted, even though they've been very tiny, except for the one last year that was a large anomalous outbreak, all of them are traced back to vaccinated populations. So stop it with saying that it's vaccinated people, unvaccinated people that cause these problems. That's the first dishonest thing. Lumping it in with something that there's no vaccine for, and then let's realize how many things there are no vaccines for. The flu thing every year, about 30% effective if you're lucky, somewhere around there. So that means about 70% of the different various flu viruses aren't included in their chemical guesswork for that particular year. But it's sad to see, because this is one of the problems. This is one of the things that is at the back. This is one of the core problems that will come out of the meta event that is this coronavirus, regardless of how it got here, regardless of whether it's worse than the flu or could be worse than the flu potentially if they didn't take these measures. That's the supposed argument, even though we haven't seen those numbers yet. But let's be honest about this. I don't have any boots on the ground. Most of the people don't have boots on the ground in places where they could say that they know for certain that things are going on. So most of the information that you get about this is secondhand. And there's going to be a big push, and there already is. It's already happening for vaccines and for mandatory vaccines. It's already building up to it. If any conspiracy exists, it could be in that right there. There's talk of Bill Gates and his manipulations in the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the fact that they've been caught repeatedly poisoning people with the injections that they're giving out to these third world nations. There's all kinds of lines you can go down for conspiracy and what could possibly have happened and where it could be and did they do this is the big one. Did they do this to try to take out a bunch of the leadership in Washington? Oh, there's a big question right there, right? With all of the with most of the leadership in Washington being over sort of 60 years old, and that being the most affected group by this virus. So there's any number of these paths that you can walk down to the who, what, where, when, why, how. But the reality is that the things that are happening on the street, the fact that this should be a serious wake-up call for a whole subsection of people that think they're better than preppers. And that's a whole lot of people. I think it's been proven over the last week how quickly the stores can be emptied. Now, realize that right now we're not experiencing a real crisis. This is a manufactured crisis in so much as the methods being used, the rules being passed down, we're being told to stay out of groups and things like that. The rest of it is normal. Everything is normal. The store shelves will be filled back up again. There's a big question about how quickly they can be filled up because of the fact that they've all been emptied. It's not just stores in a region. It's sort of stores all across the nation. These are the things that we have to concentrate on. What the event is being used to do and how people are responding to it. My guest is going to be Jon Burlew. He's coming up in just about 5 minutes. Stick around on Toward Anarchy. If you have to go through the archive, easily done. You just click on the archive button right up there at the top. Click on Toward Anarchy 2020 archive. I encourage you not to use the Firefox browser, something I've found out here recently. Don't use it. It doesn't play the archive stuff. If you have to dig into the archive, it'll only play a portion of it before it bails out on it. And there's nothing wrong with it. Everybody, something just shy of 7 billion people listen to those MP3s and those files off of my website every week. So something just shy of 7 billion people. There's a number of, just a couple. March 15th, Jon Burlew is my guest. He'll be joining us here in just a couple of minutes right after the next break. He's an educator. He's a radio announcer, a funny guy, a comic book collector, a geek, a friend of mine. We're going to catch up after years and years of not having had any kind of like a personal conversation like this. And so really cool to once again use this forum to catch up. But if you're on the page there for today's show, there's also a couple of interesting links that I shared as usual, and always a quote. Our government teaches the whole people by its example. If the government becomes the lawbreaker, it breeds contempt for law. It invites every man to become a law unto himself. It invites anarchy. And as always, that's Luis Brandeis. As always, when I share something like that, I don't necessarily, but this guy's not an anarchist by any means, and he's probably as much a statist as anybody could be. He was an associate justice on the Supreme Court. I'm just sharing with you that thought, and so think about it. That's all that I ever ask. And then, of course, as always, I provide the link there so you can find out more about the actual person who said the quote that I shared. I thought this image was cool, and I've had it with these images. I'm just not sure what to do with them because they just don't translate so well, and I'm so bad about ever addressing them directly, but I just thought this one was great when it came up, and so I'll try to describe it to you if you're not able to actually pull it up right now. It's a 3-panel cartoon kind of thing, and in the first panel at the top it says, it's a guy painting on a street corner, and you see the edge of the building. He's painting on the edge of the building. It says, just do nothing. And then you see him in the next panel. He's painting again on another corner, and it says, it is impossible. But then you take a different perspective, and you stand back from the two corners, and you see that they actually are the same corner from each other, and it's actually just do it. Nothing is impossible. So hopefully, for once, that image actually is explained to you. Just do it. Nothing is impossible. It's just a beautiful little thought that expresses as well in words for once as it does as a visual image, and it's there for you to share. I thought these were neat. With musical cryptography, composers can hide messages in the melodies, and there's a link there for it's interesting little, just a note about how long composers have been using music and their compositions to say different messages, and how through the years other people have created harmonic alphabets and used different notes and the configurations of the entire clef, the treble clef, the bass clef, all of it, all the different little signatures, everything that's in there to convey some sort of secret message or something like that. And that brought me to a geek thing, since we'll be talking about it's going to happen. I guarantee it, because I'll insist on it. It brought me to a geek idea, and that was the theremin. And you know what the theremin is? That's that woo instrument that they used for the beginning of the original soundtrack, Star Trek program, and the soundtrack for the original Star Trek program, and the introduction to it, and there was something, and I don't remember the details. I should have looked it up, but I'm kind of almost betting that John might know for us, and we'll maybe ask him a little bit about it. That there was something about them attempting to, or actually successfully using the theremin to send secret messages during the war. I don't know. It's a geek thing, so I'm hoping my geek friend will know. That's kind of the way it works. So we get just a couple of minutes, and then we'll go into the break, and we'll pay the bills, we'll do all that good stuff, and then we'll get back here and we'll talk to John. But next week coming up, a good friend and another one of these catch-up conversations. I'm just loving these conversations, the way they go off, and just the attention that they attract, because they're so personal and so interesting and fun in that reconnecting that we've been doing, and that's true. Because this is one of these long time conversation catch up things again, and so that's real interesting. But Jon Burlew is an educator. He is a broadcaster, announcer, stand-up comedian, sometimes mechanical bull rider. He's an interesting individual that I like to have these conversations with, whether I know these people or not. So it's an extra treat in this case because I do. Jon was my instructor in college in radio, and under his tenure at that school, this little 2-year college in the middle of nowhere, Kansas, became the leader, the number one college station, the number one college radio program in the nation for a number of years. It contended with the biggest names across the board, the 4-year universities, places where they pride themselves in the talent and people that they put out into the marketplace. And so he's a pro, and he's my friend, and it's really great to get a chance to catch up with him. Jon Burlew, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me, my friend.
Michael, it's good to hear from you again. I apologize. I was working on my theme music and couldn't get the people together. They bowed out at me, this virus stuff. They didn't want to get in the studio with me.
Well, that's a problem with your kind of theme music. You have like the live traveling theme music, right?
Oh, yeah, it's all a cappella. Yeah, gypsies. I use a lot of gypsies.
Beautiful. It's pretty good to be Jon Burlew, I got to say. I mean, I respect you. You seem to be a well-respected guy. You've been very successful in life and in your career. So I like to bring people like yourself to my listener and just let them talk about themselves and brag about themselves. But it's always kind of cool when it's a situation where I actually know the individual and we haven't had a chance to catch up in a long, long time. I mean, we've been connected digitally, but we haven't had a conversation in a number of years. So
no, not in a long time. I was respectful anyway until agreeing to do this show. We'll see how it goes.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. No,
there's always the stigma.
I was thinking it's been well over 20 years since we had an actual conversation.
Yeah, I mean, and we had conversations, because one of the things that was really great about our relationship and getting to meet you was the fact that we were very like-minded, from very different backgrounds and different places with different sort of home lives and values and everything, but we had a very core common value, and that speaks a whole lot to people that share that value, and that's in the sort of comic book collecting and geek culture.
Yeah, brings a lot of people together. Brings a lot of people together.
Well, and we did it, and this was back before it became popular, right?
Oh, yeah.
It was only just beginning at that time to sort of hit the mainstream. Clerks was just coming out around that time.
Yeah, very, very front end of all of this, and I often sit back and watch people now. It's become so mainstream that's taken some of the fun, some of the excitement out of it, I think.
Yeah, no question about it. Being a hardcore collector and a real reader of comic books like yourself, how have you taken like the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Give me your general impression.
I do an awful lot of explaining. Everyone wants to sit by me in the theater, and I'll liken them, the story that they're watching on the screen, to the story as it took place in the actual comic books, and explain the differences and kind of predict what's happening from there. And it's interesting, but when those movies come out, I'm a pretty popular guy for a couple of weeks.
You're the guy that knows everything.
Yeah. People I haven't heard from in 20 years call me and want to know what's going on.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah. Hey, I was thinking we could do the show. We got Storm and Thunder on the
That's right.
on the air now.
Johnny Thunder.
Yeah.
This has been a long time coming.
Yeah. I don't know how did we miss all of that, but it sounds like a natural. Did I ever tell you the story how that air name came about, the Johnny Thunder air name?
Tell me.
I was a program director, PD at the time, and I had a night guy that would change he did the, if I remember, it was 6 to midnight shift, and he changed his on-air name. He was changing his on-air name 3 times a week. So I had a couple of conversations with him, and we talked about it, and I said, listen, you got to find one, you got to stick with it. Well, he changed his name again a couple of times after that. And the last one was really, really silly. Joey Gunn or something like that. It was really silly that he went with. So I did the morning show, and the general manager was my news guy. He came in and did news at the top of the hour, local news at the top of the hour.
Right.
And I introduced him and everything. And here we go. And he thanked Jon Burlew. And I said, well, now, wait a minute. I said, that's not my real name. My real name is Johnny Thunder. So I was kind of making fun of this night guy, you know. It was supposed to be a one-time, one-liner, just kind of a funny thing. But you know as well as I do, sometimes those things stick.
They stick.
So now for 30 years now, people that knew me at that time and soon after still call me Johnny Thunder. I hear Johnny Thunder all the time now.
That's hilarious. I totally
So that's
forgot
how all that got started.
And I'd never heard the story about how it started, but I totally forgot that it was Johnny Thunder. That's great. How did you even find yourself in radio? How did that even begin? Did you go to school for it? Was there somebody that you knew that was in radio?
Oh yeah, to be honest, and I don't tell this story a whole heck of a lot, but I went to college on a drama scholarship.
Oh boy.
I wanted to be a playwright. I really wrote a lot and did a lot of plays, one-act plays, and went to school on a drama scholarship. As part of that drama scholarship, I had to take a couple of broadcasting classes to fulfill that scholarship, and got into the radio broadcasting. And once I had a feel for it, once I got it in my blood, that was it. And that's been, 30-some years ago. But drama, that theater scholarship lasted one semester. Once I tried the radio and got involved with it, it was something that has been with me ever since.
That's cool. That you didn't set out. I mean, I grew up in the big city listening to the local rock station, and
Sure.
and so that's going to the concerts and seeing the DJ there and seeing them sort of be, liked and acknowledged, and that sort of appealed to me a little bit, and I think that's what attracted me to it initially. But then it's funny because I show up there at Colby. And, they do these personality testings and things like that before you go into college. And
some of us still made it anyway.
And some of us still made it. That's, yeah. Some of us got jobs. We'll have to talk about that. The testing came back, the psychological testing came back that it was a terrible sort of type of position for me, at least the psychologist thought on it was, because it was a position of spotlight, and that I had no interest in personal attention so much as wanting to maybe entertain or present a message or something. And so it's kind of funny to find myself here too.
Yeah, well, in the college context, and I'm just gonna be blunt. I don't know if your listeners. Are your listeners used to that? Are they okay with that?
They're pretty blunt.
From the college perspective, and I'm talking 30 years ago, 40 years ago, long time ago, that broadcasting was for people that weren't too bright, weren't too smart. So they were directed that way. Oh, you go into broadcasting, you go into communication. So anyone that did score well on placement tests and did well, they were kind of discouraged from going that route. So, I was joking earlier when I said some of us made it anyway. Some of us made it anyway in spite of the system and in spite of what we were directed to do.
Yeah, well, it was neat because while I was attracted to this sort of glamorous rock star approach to radio, what I quickly found out was I would tune into CBS Monday Night Football and
Yeah.
listen to the descriptions and the way they talked and the way they described things, and it would just paint such clear pictures in my mind. And it was the beginning of this sort of this here, I think, in this wanting to have these long form type of conversations with people and really get into it instead of having these sort of 5-minute interviews with your favorite artist or person.
Yeah, I tell people, in my current role, I'm asked constantly about my background, about education, about what young people should do. And I kind of joked about it earlier, but I always begin with promoting theater and drama as one of the most impactful areas of study that I had in my background. A lot of what we do and what you're describing right now is all about storytelling. And if you've ever been in a studio with Michael Storm, if you've ever been in a studio with me, certainly the voice is an important part of that story, but we're not telling that story just with our voice. Our facial expressions, even our body language are all, it's all part of that package. And I learned a lot of that from theater, from drama, and absolutely believes that it carries over the airwaves when we tell these stories.
Well, yeah, and my listener is familiar with that idea because one of the things I've said it sort of tongue in cheek that this is like a reality radio show.
Yeah.
But it kind of is because what I spend a lot of the time doing is talking about what I'm doing and how I'm going about it and how I'm being successful at it. And that comes with, I hadn't been on the air in about 4 or 5 years. I hadn't done anything like this in a while before this started up last year. And you lose that skill real quick, that ability to communicate and that ability to, especially to fill in where you think that silence is dropped or to be able to maintain a conversation. And that comes with a sharp memory and all of, I've watched how these things have all improved over the last year and how I feel better about it. My short-term memory and everything is better.
Never, no question about it. And I've been doing this for a lot of years, and I continue to hear the same things. I primarily do sports broadcasting now. I did a remote broadcast yesterday from a community event, but I pick apart every broadcast that I do, and if I'm not seeing some growth, some improvement in that, boy, we're our worst critics. I mean, I just tear myself up over it. In this day and age where everything is recorded, everything is archived, you want to do your very best and you want to continue to grow and to get better at it. And back then, when we were hanging around together and everything, and you were in my classes, we got together and listened to each other. I'll date ourselves some more. We'll listen to each other's cassettes and talk about each other's cassettes and stop them and back them up and drink another beer and talk about something else that you did that worked or didn't work. I don't see that much anymore. Everybody's so defensive and so sensitive. They don't want to talk about what they can do to improve. And I think the industry and what we do has suffered because of that.
I think that's absolutely true. It's interesting. Okay, so because you've been witness to all of these things and may have different views of them, but I bet you don't because I bet they stick out the same way. There's a number of things that have occurred over our years of being in radio, and one of those is the change in the shifting in from local back to a corporate model back to more local. It's sort of a tug and war that's gone back and forth. And how do you see that now? Do you think that now is the perfect time for local radio to regain a sort of power and control, where the kind of voice that it used to have, if it opens itself up to a more open communication style like the internet provides?
Oh, I think that is very common sense. I think that if you think about it, that almost has to happen for the survival of the industry. What scares me is that we've completely eliminated, I'm hesitating to use the word completely, but it's pretty darn close. We've completely eliminated our talent pool. We used to draw from and develop talent from small markets. And most of those small markets now, because it's so cost effective, they're just jukeboxes. I mean, they're very few local announcers, very few local talent on the radio. Really, when I hear local talent, when I drive back to Kansas and get into some of the rural areas where you still have some small market local owners, they're developing talent, but that's it. There's just not much of a talent pool to draw from. So, yeah, I think if local stations are going to survive, they have to have guys on there and girls on there, people on there that are referencing what's going on in their town, talking about what's happening in their town. When I was last programming at a radio station, I insisted that the announcers, every time they turned on their mic, they had to say the name of their local town, the name of their local community, something local. And we go right back to basic radio fundamentals, time and temperature. Do time and temperature, current weather conditions, talk about your hometown. Every single break, some of that has to be included because that's what corporate radio cannot provide.
And that's what made that's how you made it. That's what made T92 and made the program and everything as big as it was across the nation. It was the last. As it turns out, I don't know if we knew this at the time. Maybe you did, having been in it much longer. But it was sort of the last bastion of that kind of raw talent pool that you're talking about. It's weird to even think that that's actually true. We're going to go into a break.
Okay, go ahead. Go into your break.
Music coming up there. Yep, there it is. Okay,
is that what that means?
We'll take a real quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk some more with Jon Burlew. Go to towardanarchy.com. We'll be right back on Toward Anarchy.
This is Toward Anarchy on RBN with Michael Storm.
Oh, Adam Curry's fault. You know who Adam Curry is, right, John?
I heard that music and I didn't know what it was. I thought it was time for me to take my medication again. So I'm like double dosing now.
That's
the second half of our interview should be very exciting.
Well, we'll get to it. This is a short little segment right here. You know who Adam Curry is, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's the long-haired MTV DJ guy.
Right.
From back in the day. Right.
Back in the day.
Back in the day. Well, actually, he's never gone away, interestingly enough. He's actually responsible for this. This is his fault. All these changes in radio, the switch to internet broadcasting, podcasting, this is all his fault. He didn't create RSS feeds, which is how you get most of this digital delivery stuff, particularly the audio. But he was responsible for fine-tuning it and making it what it is today. It was his desire to broadcast across the internet that created it. In fact, iTunes wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Adam Curry. They gave iTunes and Apple, they gave Apple that background that they built their podcasting little empire on iTunes there.
Yeah, the technology was there. He just found a way to make it work, to make it productive.
Yeah, it was something about encapsulating the audio, and then on top of that, I mean, that wasn't necessarily that hard to do. But it was sending all the other information and then being able to, particularly how people would subscribe to it and be able to just tell their player to grab whatever was the latest thing, because it was all about download speeds back in the day. You didn't have the high speed like you did now. So yeah, it's all Adam Curry's fault. He's the one that did this.
Well, God bless them. Where there's a will, there's a way. I mean, you got to get the voices out there, and there'll always be a way to do it. DJs find a way. Announcers find a way.
Yeah, they do. They find their way. Well, it's interesting because we were just talking about before the break all the things that were happening in radio. The big things that were happening at that time still are there, are still major in radio now. The Howard Stern, Opie and Anthony, even though they've gone through their years of breakup and all that. Those big voices and those big ideas of radio and what radio would sound like in the future that would become, they were created during that time that you were running that program up there, and that was the type of stuff that we were doing. It's really cool to be a part of.
Yeah, but now instead of having 3 or 4 or 5 of those types of personalities in every medium market on up, you've got 3 or 4 or 5 of those personalities across the country that are easily accessible by the masses. That's the big difference, I think.
Yeah. And well, that, and of course the restriction, the FCC restrictions that are placed on the sort of conversations that you can have. It's something that obviously we don't have here. We do in this environment because we're trying to present a
This is RBN, the Republic Broadcasting Network.
We are living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep. The poor and the underclass are growing. Racial justice and human rights are non-existent. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain. That is their primary method of survival. Keep us asleep, keep us selfish.
The coffee is cold. I know that sounds funny, but I just can't do the hot coffee thing. I've never been able to do it. Off into hour number 2 toward Anarchy. We do this live every Sunday, 1 to 3 p.m. Central Time, right here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. And as always, it's a pleasure, and I appreciate the fact that you take a little bit of time. But there's no excuse today with the coronavirus thing. Church has been canceled, so there's no football, there's no basketball, there's no church, there's no excuse. You have to tune in today. I'm having a great conversation. If you go to towardanarchy.com, you'll see that I'm speaking with Jon Burlew, and he's a friend of mine, and he's an educator, and he's a radio announcer, and he's played around doing stand-up comedy, and apparently wanted to be a playwright when he was growing up. This is the beauty of having these conversations. You get to learn some things and learn some stuff about people that you didn't ever know before, and it's been just so much fun to be able to do this. Jon, how did you even get into teaching then? Did you go straight from school and learning to wanting to be a teacher, or did you do some time out there in radio and spend some time out in the marketplace and kind of found out that, yeah.
You ever see that episode of MASH where the guy convinces everyone he's a surgeon? He's a con man, and that's kind of what I did. I just showed up at the college and told them I was a teacher. Nobody ever checked. And here I am 30 years later still getting a paycheck.
And still doing it. Where you teach at now?
I'm out in Kentucky now. I'm not teaching broadcasting. Haven't taught broadcasting in a number of years, but to answer your question, I was out in the industry. I worked. That was one of the great things about radio. I hate to say back in my day, but back in my day, that was a great thing about radio. It put me through college, and my family, good gravy. I don't know what we would have done without radio over the years. I've worked consistently in radio pretty much my whole life now, and I was working, went from the community college, finished up at the community college with the degree in broadcasting, was working in the industry, went on to get my bachelor's degree. As I was finishing up my bachelor's degree in oral communication, never even saw the university radio station, never went in the doors. of the university radio station because I was working in the industry. I was full time. In fact, I was doing mornings and was working as a program director most of the time that I was an undergrad at the university. I'd go in. In fact, I worked there towards the end, the last couple of years of my undergrad work. I was driving 50 miles to be at work at 5:30 in the morning, doing the morning show, then turning around and driving back, going to class. And back in those days, we had classes every night of the week. I did that so that I could get the radio work in. It paid the bills, paid the rent. Then when this job opened up, a teaching position opened up at the community college, you talked about it being the best radio program in the country. And of course, I'm going to agree with you.
No question.
But one of the things that was unique about it, and people are saying, how can you say that? It was one of very, very few vocational broadcasting programs in the country. And from an academic standpoint, vocational has all kinds of connotations to it and all kinds of definitions. But when, as you know, when someone graduated from that 2-year program, they were ready to go to work. And most of the students did. You talked about it, that lasting for a number of years. I was there 11 years. In that time, every single one of our graduates, 100% of our graduates who wanted to go to work in a radio station went to work in a radio station.
Had a job.
So, that made it very, very unique. So because it was a vocational program, I was able, just like you said, I was able to go to work based on my undergrad degree and my years of experience in the industry. And that's a really fantastic thing with vocational programs, that they honor work done in the industry and work done in the field. So I went in teaching broadcasting, and the college, for me to continue, they wanted me to continue my education. I'm really glad they insisted on it. They wanted me to get a master's degree in broadcasting, and even though I started when I was 22 years old, I don't know if you realize that or not. But I was fortunate enough to start as a baby. I was very, very young, and they insisted that I get my graduate degree, which I was all in favor of. But they really pushed me to get a master's degree in broadcasting. And you know as well as I do, there's no point in that. It would have been very, very limiting. So I got my master's degree. My graduate work was done in oral communications and public speaking. That allowed me to pick up and move the family from Kansas here to Kentucky. And even though teaching full time, when I became an instructor, became a teacher, I still continued in the industry. I did freelance work and sports broadcasting, anything I could do, commercial production, anything I could do freelance while I was teaching. So no regrets, really pleased with the way things have turned out and what radio has allowed me to do.
It's a very cool story. It's one of the things that is kind of unique about people in radio. It's funny, the conversation earlier talking about the intelligent people not being encouraged to go into radio and into broadcasting, and that's bothersome for any number of reasons. I could go on about conspiracy.
Absolutely, you think about the very, very best people that you've worked with in broadcasting and what you do, and you think of the people that are just stellar, that just stand out, and they're some of the smartest people you'll talk to. Very, very intelligent. Now, the two of us are exceptions, of course, but most people in the industry that have any kind of success are extremely intelligent and very, very well read.
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. And hey, come on, to be fair, we're pretty well read. They just happen to have a lot of pictures and a lot of colors and bubbles that hold the letters. I mean,
our libraries are contained in Mylar.
Indeed. If they, yeah. How many books?
Oh gosh, I'm well over 15,000 right now. And you know what I tell people? It's not quantity, it's quality.
Right, and
Because
that's what I was going to ask you. Yeah.
this collection, I've never bought a collection. I've never bought like a long box of comics or someone's collection that they're trying to get rid of. Each one of these comics was picked out individually by me, for me, or they were gifts from my parents or family members or friends that wanted me to have this particular book for whatever reason. So they're all very, very meaningful to me. That makes the collection unique to me and invaluable to me. But I've got well over 15,000. I started collecting in the early 70s, 72, 73. I bought my first book. Got it right at the tail end of the 12-cent price period.
Right,
really
15s.
Started buying within the 15-cent was the cheapest I really started buying on a regular basis. And now up to, what are we paying now, $4.99?
Oh, gosh, yeah. At least. God forbid that there be some kind of special cover or.
Oh, yeah. I don't buy into that. I really like Jon Burns' artwork. I get real excited about new Jon Burns stuff that's coming out. I like George Perez a lot. Those artists, my daughter likes Scotty Young. Every now and then, those artists will put out something that I really, really like and really want to get, and I might pay $10 for one or something like that, But I've made enough connections and enough networking that people know what I like, and they'll grab it up for me at cover price. You've done that for me a couple of times, and I've done that for you. I mean, that's just the way the hobby works, or the life works.
Well,
the comic life.
You do that, especially, and you go to some of the conventions and things like that too, and you get to know people if you're really into it. You really get to connect with people and meet people around the nation and make those connections to be able to find you some of the
and it's really interesting. Very, very interesting what one person will collect and what they'll spend so much time trying to find, and another person's got it on hand. It doesn't mean that much to them. I've done some trading. In fact, I do more trading than I do selling. I've only sold a couple of comics in my life, but I'll trade if someone has a holy grail they're really looking for. And I've got it. I try to, unless it's something I want to hang on to, it has special meaning to me. I try and help them out, with it. And so I've done quite a bit of trading in the past.
It's just one of those interesting. It's a group thing. It's funny because people think, oh, you're a comic book geek. You just sit in the house and read comics. Why don't you go out and play with your friends? But I mean, come on, look at it.
That's true. We're not saying that's not true,
right? But there's a whole other culture underneath it, and
absolutely.
I think it's fun.
I connect to so many people and to so many people, so many people's children. Being a comic collector, like I said, people will contact me with all kinds of questions. When I was younger, my phone would ring on weekends because invariably someone would be at a party. Mike could call in the middle of a keg party with a comic book trivia question that nobody could answer, and I'd get the 2 o'clock call, 2 o'clock in the morning call. Hey, what reminds me? What was Tony Stark's dad's name?
Hey, everybody knows that one now. That's kind of what's ruined it for me.
I was throwing you up a softball.
That is right. That's a softball question. Oh, hey, what was the one not too long ago? It was one of these social media things that come across there. It was name all of the secret identities of the characters. That was those could be kind of tricky sometimes, but I mean, I nailed it. I nailed it pretty good.
Well, even on like Jeopardy, they'll every now and then they'll have a comic category. And you got to be really, really careful because they'll ask questions like, what was Ant-Man's secret identity? Well, yeah,
Which one?
Yeah. So you run into that kind of stuff all the time, and people that want to go to war with you because you've got the wrong answer. You said Henry Pym, and it's really Scott Lang.
Yeah. Well, okay. So here's an interesting thing. So you knew that you knew that I owned a comic book shop for a period of time, and I had this access to this huge collection, and nothing. It was interesting watching the culture from that side of the counter. I'd seen the culture from the other side, every bit of it, from Dungeons and Dragons to the comic book collecting to the card games, all that from the other side.
Sure.
Being on the other side of the counter and watching sort of the industry things and stuff like that, and it all happening right at the height of the MCU. And what's interesting is that the movies are not translating into people showing up at the store and buying the comic books. When you and I knew each other back in the day, and we were collecting, that was the heyday of the comic book. And collector cards as well, that period where they just printed literally 1 million of issues. And now sort of the best issues, the biggest sellers sell maybe a couple 100,000 copies.
Yeah. Well, it's, and I hate to go back to the corporate thing, but, you said it doesn't push people into comic book stores. It will for 2 weeks. But you've got these comic book stores that have ordered hundreds of the Black Widow Prelude, getting ready for the movie. And you'll go back here, that's slated to come out in May. You'll go back in June, and they'll have hundreds of Black Widow Prelude comics still in the store. So guys like the two of us that are really collecting and into the comic history and what's been going on for years and years, we're the ones that pay the price. Because, as you know, being with your experience owning a shop, you can't possibly order enough comics to meet all the needs of everybody that walks in the door of your store. That's impossible to predict. So comic book store owners now just buy pretty much what they have pre-ordered and 1 or 2 extra copies. That's the only way you can stay in business. So finding back issues that you've missed, very difficult to do anymore. And there's just
it's great for the back end, for the collectors, for the people who are dealing in the secondary market. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing, and we've wanted it for years and years. But it makes it it makes it more expensive. It makes it tougher to complete those sets now. But I guess.
Well, listen, I one of the things we were talking about, trends and crazy things that people collect. I really get into the Dell picture cover, photo cover comics of the 60s, late 60s, early 70s. Most of them were done in every TV show that was on the air during that time period. They would do comic books, and they would have photo covers on a lot of them. So when I see those in comic stores, at conventions, at flea markets, yard sales, I grab them up. So sitting behind me right now, I'm not on video, but sitting right behind me is a spinner rack, which, by the way, are worth high dollar prices now. Everyone's looking for these spinner racks that used to be in every drugstore. I've got a spinner rack full of those Dell photo comics, several of which, one whole row, is Wild Wild West. Well, Robert Conrad, I got those things for next to nothing. Robert Conrad passes away, what was that, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? And people are calling, wanting to buy, pay $100 or more for all those comics.
Is that right?
But, I'm not going to sell them because they mean something to me. But that just shows you how fickle the market. They were, less than $10 prior to his death.
That's crazy. Producer Ken commented. Apparently, your video popped on initially when you connected, and he saw the rack, and he had commented on the nice rack.
So he's backing up what I'm saying. He's verifying what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. He had said it way early.
Me. You did not trust me. You had to go to your producer for verification, video verification.
Video verification. Hey, you know what it is? It's all about truth right now.
It's all about truth. It's all about truth.
It's all fake news.
You know, one thing that I will lie about is my comic book collection. I'll tell you all kinds of things about it. It's like fishing, you know.
Right. I was just going to say, it's this big.
Yeah. You tell me you found that Hulk 181 and paid $1,000 for it, and I'll tell you I got it for cover price or something.
Right.
I found it in a dollar box somewhere.
What's your best book? I mean, not your personal favorite. You can tell me your personal favorite too, but what's your? Oh, we got to go into break. We'll take the break. We'll come back. We'll find out what Jon Burlew's favorite book is and what his most valuable book in his collection is. We'll be right back on Toward Anarchy. The radio restrictions, because it causes you to one of the things that I think has been a problem with a lot of the open sort of podcasting, broadcasting type of things is it's just too easy to be sort of vulgar and disgusting and use nasty language to fill in words and to fill in the gaps in your knowledge and your place. And it's always been used as a crutch by people. And so I think it's wonderful to keep this within this framework. And I think about that as I think about all of the myriad of memories going through my mind as I've been talking to my guest, Jon Burlew. He was my instructor in college. Oh yeah, there's so many.
Where are you going with this?
Well, we could talk about a million things, man. I mean, we did so much in just a really short period of time. I mean, we traveled halfway across the country together and hung out in bars and.
And I was never vulgar. Is that where you're going?
Well,
even though it was quite tempting, I was never vulgar.
No, you never were. You're always a gentleman. You were always a really nice guy. And so it's really cool to catch up with you after all these years and to see that you're just still a nice guy and you're still a family guy. You're still married to the same wife. You had wonderful, happy kids. I mean, I love seeing people succeed at life and be happy with the life that they succeed in. And you're one of those examples of that. And so it's been really great to get a chance to catch up with you like that. Tell me, before we go into the break, what is your favorite book, the most important book to you in your collection? And then what's the most valuable book in your collection?
You know, I just spent the last year cataloging my collection. Right. I got this, you and I talked about this. I got this comic database that has really been fantastic. And it gives me all kinds of data, all kinds of numbers and everything. I have about 7 books that are worth $1,000 or more. Yeah, so it's kind of hard to, which one I could look, grab my tablet and look in and see which one has the most. But you know as well as I do, that changes on a daily basis. Gosh. Yes. Those 7 books will fluctuate and go up and down and back and forth. My first appearance of Morbius in Spider-Man now is outrageous. It's going up every day in anticipation of this movie coming out. I got a Batman that I bought years ago. We talked about me collecting in the 70s and 80s, and it was in one of those Whitman 3-packs.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about, that you got at the grocery store and everything. And I had no clue. I was scanning them in and putting them in this database. That darn thing was worth almost $700 because A, it's Batman, and because B, there were only a couple hundred of them printed, less than 500 of them printed. And I just happened to grab that 3-pack. It was probably, to be honest with you, it was probably the one stuck in the middle. Because, that you couldn't see. There was always a mystery comic that you couldn't see in the middle of those 3-packs. And I'm sure that one of the others that you could see appealed to me, and that's why I got that. I never would have known that I had that Batman comic, but it's worth over $600. Comics that mean the most to me.
Yeah, what's the one that means the most to you? Yeah,
They would be comics that my dad bought me. When I was in college and didn't have any money. Dad, when I would go to visit him, we'd go to a comic book store and he'd see me looking at something and he would get it for me. So those are worth emotionally. They're worth more to me than they would be to anyone else. My friend Mark, who passed away in a car accident, there were a couple of comics that he wanted me to have. They were of interest to him, and he wanted me to read them. So they're very, very valuable to me. So the comics that are most important to me are comics that were gifts over the years. I think you've sent me a couple of comics over the years. It's things like that that are really, really special to me. As far as irreplaceable comics that I couldn't replace, I've got a couple of autographed comics and those types of things, but it's really the ones that have a relationship, a connection to them that are most valuable to me. I have an autographed Wild Wild West comic from Robert Conrad. That's pretty special.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Pretty special.
Yeah,
pretty special.
That's neat. Yeah. You got a Stan Lee? You got Stan Lee's autograph, right?
Yeah, I'm looking at, I've got it mounted on my wall. I've got an amazing Spider-Man that a buddy of mine, this is another example. Buddy of mine went down to Dragon Con. This is going to make you mad. Are you ready to get mad?
All right.
Because a buddy of mine, and he's one of these guys that just falls into these things. He's riding in an elevator with a guy at Dragon Con down in Atlanta. And the guy's just chit-chatting with him. No, I don't collect comics. I just brought my wife down here for, what was it, Vampire Diaries or some vampire show. Was doing an exhibit down there at Dragon Con. Well, he's talking to this guy, and the guy says, "Hey, would you like to meet Stan Lee?" It was Stan Lee's handler. The guy goes in, has dinner with Stan Lee, sitting at his table, gets this comic autographed for me, and gifts it to me at my next birthday. It's just things like that that are really, really special, really, really valuable.
That's amazing. Brother, it's been great catching up with you. Unfortunately, our time is up.
Hey, let me just say one thing.
Yeah.
You asked me what I'm most proud of. I'm most proud of you. I'm most proud of those students that I knew 20, 30 years ago that I still keep in touch with. That's incredible. That's incredible. I'm very, very proud of you guys.
Well, we love you, brother. Thank you so much, and you take care, all right? I'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
We'll be right back on Toward Anarchy. Catch up with somebody like that, and it's just a fun conversation too, because of course we get to talk about all that geek stuff that we have in common, and I don't just mean the comic books and all of that, but just the whole radio and the friends that we have in common. The people that he was speaking about that right there at the end, the Ronnie Phillips, and there's so many others. There's Jason Wolf, and there's John Lobato, and there's Lori, and it's just all, I could just go on and on. There's just all these amazing people, Anthony, and just everybody that passed through those doors. Lupe, just every name just keeps coming to me. They're all out there, and they're all successful in their own way and doing their own things. And it's great to relive a little bit of that. I wasn't even thinking about, having a conversation with John about the sort of radio aspects and changes like that. But I mean, I guess it certainly makes sense that we would, because he has that interesting perspective. We didn't even get into bull riding, mechanical bull riding. That was something we went to Rhode Island together. Much longer story. I've talked a little bit about it before, but one night we went to this amazing club. It was like 5 clubs in one building. And the main club was on the bottom floor. And you realize this is in the mid to late 90s. And so, the country music thing is really huge at the time. Garth Brooks and Miley Cyrus is dead, and all that stuff was going on in and around that time period. It was really, really popular. So the biggest club was this country club on the bottom floor, and I mean, we're responsible, but come on, us DJs, when we turn off the microphone, we turn up the volume, we turn on the beer, and the F-bombs start dropping. I mean, we let go. we live it up and enjoy our lives, and we did that while we were there, seriously and doing important things for us and for the program and everything at the time. When it was time off, we were at the bars having a great time. And one of the things we did that night is we went into that giant club, and that whole bottom floor was filled with this just basically sawdust on the floor kind of, kicker place. It was beautiful, wonderful, loud music and women in short shorts and big boots, and just, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, it was a great scene. But they had one of the features of the bar was this gigantic mechanical bull, and some of us rode it and some of us did not. And John was one of us that rode it. And man, you should see, we got back to the hotel room, and over the next couple of days, his thighs just black and blue from trying to hold on to that bull. And I think he rode it the best out of all of us who did actually try to ride. I didn't stay like 2 seconds. I was thrown off of the thing. So he rode that sucker hard and put her away wet. That shows you a little bit. Hey, I grew up in the middle of the country, not on one of these frilly left or right coasts. I know things about horses. I've ridden horses and cared for ranch animals and things like that. I'm no city boy, even though I was raised in the city and grew up in the city. It's time to talk about a couple of other things. I didn't have a lot to talk about. There's just some fun stuff that I thought was interesting. I come across that I thought you might get to check out. And I had been talking about like Netflix specials and things like that. In fact, I'm about to dump Netflix. I'm bored with it already. I don't care. I'm finding that I'm not going back to it to try to find programming. I kind of like The Ranch, the Ashton Kutcher show. That show's pretty good, and I guess it's over, so I might try to finish the last couple seasons of that. But it's got Dax Shepard in it now, and I can't stand that guy on a personal level. I cannot stand that man on a personal level. Any person who thinks that it's funny to joke about the vaccine-injured individuals, of which there are tens of thousands every year in this nation, is a piece of garbage. And so it was really hard for me as soon as Dax Shepard came on that show to keep watching it. But overall, I just have lost interest across the Netflix thing. The comedy specials and stuff like that, I've been trying to catch up on those. And that was what I watched most recently, was the Pete Davidson special, the Saturday Night Live guy. And the only reason that I mentioned it is because it was great. He did this bit where he was talking about the joke that he did on Saturday Night Live that got him in trouble with the Texas. I bet Ken knows. It's the blind guy. He's got one eye missing. He lost it in the war. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but they made a joke about him. At any rate, he got in trouble for it. It caught a little bit of a backlash, and the guy ended up coming on the show and doing Saturday Night Live with them, and he was apologizing, and just all this sort of silliness around it. Yeah, Crenshaw, that's right, exactly. Yep. And but during this joke, when he's telling about this story, when he's talking about it, the guy says, "Oh, well, somebody tells him right after he made the joke, I guess, that, hey, that guy lost his eye in the war." And he's like, "Look, man, I'm sorry. I don't have a collection of baseball cards. I've told you this before. When it comes to, there are people who collect information like other people about politics, about philosophy, about religion, about the characters within those fields. that collect that information like people collect baseball cards. And so I just thought it was great that he gave that same sort of analogy that I've given for years when I say I apologize if I misstate, but this is not baseball card facts that I have memorized when it comes to this stuff. It's just things that come across. Oh, yeah, are you a baseball card collector? Is that right? I didn't know that. Just card collector at all, or just in general? Producer Ken is chatting with me and all. All of a sudden, I'm talking about collecting cards, and he mentions that it's a hobby. I've been across the board with the hobby thing. Man. I've done it all. I've collected everything. My comic book collection. I didn't wave my sword during the conversation. My current comic book collection is, 600, 700 books, maybe 1,000 books, something like that. Very, very small collection. In fact, most of them have no meaning to me whatsoever, and I'm only holding on to them because I haven't got around to selling them. There's a few hundred that I'm keeping personal, means something to me that I really like. Star Wars, Transformers, stuff that I grew up with, the originals from back in the day. But my overall collection, the owning the comic book shop, that collection was 1.5 million books. And in the end, I didn't end up keeping it. I didn't end up buying the comic book store and keeping that whole collection and being a part of that. But before that, I did have a 10 to 12,000 book collection. I never took account of them all, but I had more than 30 long boxes full of comic books at the time. It was a great collection. X-Men, Batman, all the good stuff, all my favorites. Sold all that stuff. I've been through it all. I've sold all them. There's those cards, the baseball cards. It's all been fun. You've been through it here with me recently, the collecting thing, where I did a purge just a few months back. I just did a purge. I was just like, you know what? I'm tired of this stuff sitting around collecting dust. And it just minimized again. I lightened the load again a little bit at a time. And I think that's probably one of the best ways that I've been able to just manage me in general. Do it. Have the fun. And then say enough is enough and stop having the fun. It's time to move on to something else. That's been sort of a theme throughout my life, do it, have the fun, do it well, or do something else, find something else to do. Make it your own, make it work for you. Go to towardanarchy.com. This is something that I've been making work for me for the past year now. And it just gets better and better every day. Every show gets a little bit better. It's wonderful to feel like you have a place and a space, and that you're doing your thing and you're feeling about it. Because I've been through that period in life, and I think everybody goes through it. Maybe a lot of people don't experience it as heavily as some because they don't live internally. I talked to you about the internal monologues. I guess it was part of the conversation a little bit last week with Axel and Tony Z, right? There's apparently there are people that don't have internal monologues, and that's a weird thing to me, because to me that's like not questioning your reality as you're going along. And it's also another thing that I've talked about before, that I guess if people don't have an internal monologue like that they maybe they don't have this either. And it's this multi-layered thinking. I have about 15 thoughts going on in the back of my head right now. I'm thinking about names, places. I'm thinking about what to talk about next. I'm thinking about the thing that I'm saying right now. I'm looking at the fact that I just got a message from producer Ken over there, and he's talking about metal welding. In fact, I've got a million lines of thought within my head, and I'm actually conscious of them all. Here's an example of that I think pop culture maybe will catch you if you're not quite getting what I'm saying. If you watch oh God, the show with Sheldon, it's just Big Bang Theory. That's one. It's a conversation that they had on the show early seasons that they had about a brain that multitasks and about the way that you think. And I've always wondered if that's a consistent thing, if everybody has it, or if it's not something that everybody has. And to me, all of those lines of thoughts, obviously not everybody has it. All of those lines of thought all have a voice. They're all voicing an internal monologue. They're all speaking in their own voice. If they were all speaking in the same sort of voice, this is weird, I know, to be hearing this as opposed to experiencing this, because it kind of might make you sound crazy, but I'm not. I mean, I'm not any more crazy than you. So for some of you, that's too much. They all have to have their own individual voice. It's a chorus of voices, because if it was the same voice, they'd drown each other out. And there's priority, because the things that I'm speaking have to take priority in the thoughts that are at the front of my mind right now. They have to be the first thing that are coming out right now. Otherwise, I can't keep the conversation going. But then there's another voice at the next layer that's, what's the next thing you're going to talk about? And then there's another one, and there's, what do I got to do tonight? And when's the wife and kids getting back? And what's for dinner? And just all of these, constant monologue running in there. Wideband receiver, that's a good way to look at it. My wideband receiver is open, and you know what? I apologize. Believe it or not, this cold is still just like a tickle in the back of the throat. It's still just been there just a little bit of the runny nose kind of thing. I think it's all still part of that. No, I don't think it was a coronavirus. No, doing this whole thing, this whole experiment here, this program, this show, this whatever it is, has increased that. It's increased that flow to the brain overall, that blood flow and just the energy and electricity and everything. It's improved it. It's sharpened it. It's pretty cool. It's an interesting, neat thing to experience, especially if you go from working with it regularly to letting it lapse and then to pick it back up again, and to watch it grow and to understand it. Because I think initially, this would be my case, is that it's just growing up. It's just who I am. I didn't have any analysis of myself. I just am who I am. And then having this period of time where I was down and I wasn't who I am, and the period after, to see the difference and to see the importance of what I was and knowing maybe a little bit more about it. It's not necessary in that sense to be able to keep going. I apologize if this is just a little bit esoteric. I'm just trying to work this out in a sense of how it can apply to you, or if you're anywhere in between, if you haven't reached that point yet where you've gone through life and you've struggled and you've tried to do things this way and they don't work out, so you try to do them a different way, or you give up and you don't want to do those things. If you're anywhere on that scale prior to the point where you spent the time down and you spent the time re-questioning, you spent the time rebuilding your own identity and who you are within yourself, and how that translates to physical and mental wellness and capacity, and how it's going to ultimately improve your ability to communicate with not strangers necessarily like I'm doing here, but with everyone. It gives you have to rethink the internal dialogue, that monologue, whatever it is that's going on in my head all the time is situational. And it's telling me, it's the kind of thing where those conversations that are going in the back of my head keep me from saying stuff that's going to get me in trouble. And the more you're consciously aware of that, the less likely you are to say things and do things publicly or privately with other people that will make them not like you, that will make them think less of you, or want to abuse you, maybe right there at that point, or even maybe worse, behind your back to other people that you love or care about, or things like that, or that might know you or have some cause or reason to have influence in your life and importance within your own head. So That was an interesting little working out of what's going on inside my brain all the time. And if you can't relate to that, I pity you, but at the same time, you're lucky, because I don't know. With great power comes great responsibility, even if it's within your own mind, because everything that you live in your own mind is a potential reality that you create outside you. You see how important that is? If you're not living in yourself and questioning who you are and what you're doing, then who you are and what you're doing is not getting a filter of your own perspective or your learned perspective or anything before it gets out there in the reality. We'll come back and wrap this up on Toward Anarchy. I didn't unplug it. Okay, cool. I moved it, and it wasn't going to work for a second there, but then it did. All right, so that's the way it goes. Hey, listen, thanks for tuning in, guys. It's been another wonderful one, as always. Next week, go to towardanarchy.com, and, of course, it'll always tell you, keep you up to date. You can sign up for the email list. It's that big blue banner that's right in the middle of the front page there. I haven't put a link up at the top yet, but I will be here soon for people to be able to join the email list, and I'll start sending those out. I'm actually going to wait until the beginning of next month to start the newsletter, because I'm going to figure out if I want to do, if I want to format the thing, or if I just want to send out simple text, or if I want to send the page itself for that week. I can do that. I could just email that page to you, that web page to you. It's interesting, all the different options that I have to be able to do that. But if you keep scrolling, once you've signed up for it, of course, you scroll down to the bottom, you see what's upcoming. That's next week, March 22nd. Robert Long, he's the custom carver. He's a good friend of mine from back when I was a teenager, late teens, 17, 18, 19 years old. We ran around on the streets together and raised a bunch of hell, and we've stayed in contact all these years later. And he is now doing these great and wonderful custom carving experiences, whether it's wood or tile or glass or whatever it is. Just all these different things that he can do this laser carving and etching and stuff on, and it makes these amazing custom little prints in all these different ways. And we're going to bring him in. We're going to catch up on our friendship, and then we will also talk about how maybe he can help you. Oh, we're going to give a code word or something, like you'll reach out to him and tell him Anarchy, and he'll hook you up and help you out with a little discount on some kind of custom product. Maybe you buy it for a friend for a gift or something like that. Or he can put if it's any kind of image, he can put it on almost any surface. It's amazing. The cool little tools that he's had and the toys that he's got. And he also does other woodwork and things like that as well. So we'll get into that next week, and a bunch of other shows. I haven't updated up there on the site, but I will here over this next week, because I was playing around with the security stuff and getting that padlock up there on the address bar. And so now that that's done, I'll get all the upcoming shows that are coming up. I'll get that listed out. I've got David Horowitz is coming back on the show. Derek Claus is going to be on. My cousin Judy. That's going to be an interesting conversation. Also, a friend from high school and junior high that I haven't talked to in years, that I want to bring her on because she's a statist. And I'm, a lot of this is me trying to learn how to talk to statists. And so I want to talk to her about her statism. So those are all things that are coming up. So you have to stick around. You have to tune in. You have to like. You have to share. You have to follow along. And it all starts right there at towardanarchy.com and republicbroadcasting.org. We'll see you next week on Toward Anarchy. Take care.
You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, because you can handle the truth.